The marketing for this movie might as well just cut to the chase. The power of a cameo compels you. The power of a cameo compels you. The power of a cameo compels you. What is up, everybody, and welcome to my review of the latest from the Blumhouse David Gordon Green collaboration, Exorcist Believer, the new legacy sequel to the original beloved classic. As far as the Exorcist franchise, not the biggest fan. I do really respect the original. I think it's a very good movie. It's never really been one of my favorites of all time. It's never been one of the scariest films of all time for me. I know I'm on an island with that, but that's the God's honest truth. Exorcist 3 is absolutely my favorite in this franchise. That's one of my favorite horror films of all time. Every other movie in this franchise is either god-awful or very forgettable. And despite having a lot of love for Exorcist 3, I have always maintained that The Exorcist is one of those movies that never made sense to follow up. It never made sense to turn it into a franchise. That is a one-and-done storyline. It is completed. Everything that that movie needed to accomplish and say was done with the first film. And yet, because it's a beloved property, because we are in the time where legacy sequels to classic horror films are big business, you had the collaboration of Blumhouse and David Gordon Green, and even some of the writers and a lot of people that were responsible for the most recent Halloween reboot trilogy coming over to apply all of their knowledge and talents and directions to the Exorcist franchise to kick off a brand new trilogy of legacy sequels, starting with Exorcist Believer. Now, I was neither a hater or a lover of the Halloween trilogy. I think that there was a lot of things that they did very well in those three movies. I think there was a lot of things that they fell on their face with, and it's a fine trilogy to me. However, that creative team and the things that they were able to accomplish well as the things that they didn't accomplish so well, never made sense to be applied to the Exorcist franchise to me. As soon as they announced that they were doing this and the people involved with it and the fact that they were starting off announcing a trilogy that is meant to follow up a film that, as I've said, never made sense to follow up in the first place, I've been nothing but skeptical about this. Just nothing about any of those details ever gave me faith or perked me up or made me think, you know, that might be kind of cool and interesting and unique. And then when we eventually got the trailer, basically everything I was skeptical or fearful of this movie becoming was more or less advertised in that trailer. You had Ellen Burstyn's character front and center, as if her character's return has anywhere near the value or the weight of bringing back Jamie Lee Curtis as a Laurie Strode character or any of the other numerous characters that we've seen brought back in legacy sequels over the past 5 years. It just felt so corporate to me. It felt so checkboxed. It felt so manipulative and cash grabbed. And yet, because I had such a massive surprise and just dined on my words in regards to Saw X just a couple of weeks ago, I really hoped that I was going to be 2 for 2, walking out saying, you know what, guys, as skeptical as I was, that was fucking awesome. Spoiler alert, that didn't happen. So let's talk about the positives that Exorcist Believer was able to pull off. First of all, I did like the setup of the film. Though it is a little bit reminiscent of the first film, having a parent and a child, and maybe was following a little too closely. I'm a father myself, and putting your child in danger, especially in a situation like demonic possession where you really cannot help them, that's a storyline, that's a motivation, that's a character arc that I can definitely get behind and I can get invested in. So Leslie Odom Jr.'s character, I was definitely walking in his footsteps in this story thinking, what would I do? What would I think? How would I feel in that situation? And if you can get me to sympathize with your character and identify with their story and their struggle, that's a success. I also think that, all around the acting is pretty good, but the two little girls that end up being possessed in this movie, I thought they did a really good job as far as being effectively creepy, and even before they go full-on demonic possession where they're just kind of disoriented and looking a little bit odd and kind of like they're just mentally in a different spot during the second act of the film, even that stuff I thought was really effective acting. But predominantly in the third act, when it's full-on exorcism mode and they're full-on demonic, their faces are contorted and scratched and scarred, and they got the evil voices coming on. Fuck you. God played that trick on you. That side of their performances I thought was done well. It's not prevalent throughout the movie. Actually, to the best of my memory, it was only in one sequence, but there's kind of a modernized, updated version of the classic Exorcist score. It almost has more of an electronic synth sound to it, not quite as hard as what the Carpenters did with the newest Halloween score, but heading in that direction, and I actually liked it. When that score kicked in, I actually kind of got a little perked up. I was like, okay, yeah, maybe the movie's gonna start getting good now. And finally, I will give credit to the fact that this is a well-done production. You know, it looks nice, it's shot nice, the production value of the sets and the special effects for the most part are all pretty good, but if I'm being honest, I kind of feel like that's a participation trophy at this point. You know, congratulations, the camera was in focus the whole time. Now moving on to the negatives, and I need to say this to be fair. The movie is okay. It is not a travesty. It is not something that's going to ruin your childhood. It is not going to end up in the bottom worst of the year. It's a generic, predictable, redundant, studio corporate piece of product. And some people are going to get more mileage out of that than others. As somebody that watches over 100 movies a year, and somebody that goes to the theater nearly every week, and somebody that despises when a beloved property gets this treatment, I'm not going to get so much mileage out of that. So there's going to be a much heavier weight on the negative side of this review, because there's a lot of individual things that I need to gripe about and I have serious issues with, and some things that just genuinely bother me as a movie fan. But at the end of the day, it's fine. It's okay. It's watchable. First and foremost, which is kind of the vibe that I got ever since the initial announcement, it feels like the Blumhouse, David Gordon Green, and Danny McBride team just had no business going into The Exorcist. It feels like all of the talents of that crew that were mostly on display in the Halloween films just did not line up with Exorcist whatsoever. This feels like a movie that is meant to be a legacy sequel that is created by people that don't understand the legacy whatsoever. To the point where there is not very much in this movie that I feel harkens back to or captures or even respects the legacy of that original film, why it was so effective, why it continues to be celebrated and beloved up to this day, why it was so iconic and made a huge impact and more or less created an entire subgenre of horror that has basically paled in comparison to that film for 50 years. But the script itself feels like it was just another generic studio January, February possession film that was just sitting around collecting dust, and somebody blew the dust off, wrote Reagan onto about 7 or 8 pages, and then turned it in as an Exorcist Legacy sequel.
Are you looking for Reagan? Are you looking for Reagan?
And the larger problem with that is that even if you're able to forgive that this is not able to capture a lot about that original film, or you walk in with the mentality of that's just never going to be a possibility, The Exorcist has been ripped off more times than Courtney Love's panties. So how many other movies have we seen that deliver exactly the same experience that this film does, but even better? And beyond not being able to capture or respect anything about that original film with Exorcist Believer, the way that they're trying to manipulate everybody into backing this financially as a legacy sequel and creating buzz for it is just the most cynical, lazy approach that I have ever seen, maybe stacked up against the most recent Texas Chainsaw Massacre. You got Ellen Burstyn's character that is brought in here, who was the mom of Reagan in the first film. That is not a character that really makes any sense to show up in a sequel 50 years later and have any significant role. And they know that because they don't do a fucking thing with her. If you've seen the trailer, you've seen 90% of her shit in the movie.
She knows who I am.
And it was hilarious to see actually on record, not only on publications and on the internet, but actually in a fucking book that was recently published about the production and the history of the Exorcist franchise, that Ellen Burstyn just wide open said, I basically wanted nothing to do with this film.
I read the script and it was a piece of
They gave her the script, she said no. They gave her a shitload of money as an offer, she said no. They doubled that offer, she said no. They tripled that offer, she said no. Like, it was so much money that I think she said it was more than double the highest that she has ever been offered in her career. And she said no. And it was only until they offered to give her her salary, and then I believe completely fund this fundraiser that she is really passionate about, that she eventually was like, fine, I'll make my deal with the devil and do your fucking movie. Now not the best publicity for the script writing to have your legacy character openly say that publicly months before the movie comes out. Had no faith in this movie, but goddamn, that money sung. And for people that are even more of a hardcore fan of the original film than I am, I think that you might even be offended or pissed off at how this movie utilizes her character, because it doesn't just waste her. What it brings her back to do is borderline, if not full-on disrespectful to the actual legacy of that character. And it feels like she's more or less just a placeholder to hopefully get other characters in for this planned trilogy. She's kind of like this vessel. She's the gateway drug that gets dispensed very quickly in hopes of, okay, we got everybody's ass in the seats now. Let's call some other people. Yeah, we got Ellen. You want to join? And it's not Ellen Burstyn's fault. Like, she does everything that she can. I mean, you can kind of tell she doesn't really want to be there, but she does suitable enough for what the movie gives her, which is dick. And so you even feel like in certain scenes, like the one it shows in the trailer where she comes face to face with the demon and, you know me, we've met before. Let that little girl go. Is that the alarm? All right, that's all the time that you paid for. Thanks for the money, bitch. Peace. Now I can hear a few people, and I've already heard a few people in the comment section say you can't walk into this with expectations from The Exorcist. You can't expect anything from The Exorcist. You can't walk in with that mentality. My argument would be when you decide to label yourself a legacy sequel, you pretty much immediately set yourself up for that comparison, and it's 100% valid to take that. But fine. Let me just humor you for a second. If we're going to remove everything out of our expectations and our experience from the original Exorcist, what does this movie give us? Well, you have a parent that his daughter disappears for a couple of days along with another girl that gets zero character development. They come back 3 days later, they start to slowly act a little bit weird, and then legacy character shows up for absolutely no reason in the second act, and then the third act becomes what I can only describe as like a greatest hits of religions attacking a demon. Like, you got all these different forms of faith, all these different people using their own different versions of religion and how they practice their spirituality, battling evil through community and love and strength of the people. David Gordon Green, are you fucking kidding me right now? Like, dude, I know Halloween Kills has its fans and Halloween Ends has its fans, but that is a extremely divisive bunch of movies, and one of the more divisive, if not one of the more lambasted elements of it, is this out-of-nowhere exploration of community versus evil. If it didn't work in Haddonfield, why the fuck are you trying it again in Exorcist? Have I ever told you the definition of insanity? So not only does it feel foolish and borderline arrogant to retread those waters yet again when they didn't go off so well the first time, but they make even less sense to implement in The Exorcist than they did at Haddonfield. The whole pre-established rules and the way that exorcism works in the first film that this is a follow-up to. High-fiving your neighbors and having the power of friendship be what compels the devil to leave these girls alone? No! Which not only disrespects the legacy of the original film yet again, but it also disrespects everybody that comes to this movie that actually has a lot of religious faith and a lot of religious beliefs that this franchise is playing in the sandbox with. You know, it's already a touchy subject for people that are very devout to watch a film like this that is playing so closely with good and evil and God and Satan. And when you get a film like this that, honestly, it just feels like this modernization of, well, we can't give a whole lot of credit to religion anymore. We got to, make sure that it's just the love of the people that is the power now. It just feels so stupid. It feels so forced, and it feels like it's going to be very disrespectful and piss off so many people. And I'm not somebody who's overly religious whatsoever, and if it annoyed me, I can only imagine what it's going to do to those that walk into this with a very devout religion. I just know in my soul it took everything that David Gordon Green had not to have a scene with all of these religious exorcisers holding their Bibles and throwing the holy water saying, "Evil dies tonight! Evil dies tonight!" Beyond all of that, the movie is not scary whatsoever. There's a couple of creepy moments. Like, there's one where Leslie Odom Jr. is talking to his daughter, and the figure of the demonic presence that is inside his daughter is just like this obscured, shadowed out figure in the background that you almost have to see or hear people gasp in the theater to direct your attention at, what are they talking about? That was a cool moment. but that's the only time it's utilized in the movie. You know, there's a couple of creepy lines of dialogue that comes out of the girls in the third act when they're starting to really dive into the psychology of the people around them and bringing up things to the surface that they didn't want to be brought to the surface. That stuff was effective here and there. The rest of the movie is just jump scares and just studio corporate horror, and that, above anything else that I've already talked about, is just the antithesis of The Exorcist. The Exorcist to this day is still the most popular answer for scariest horror film ever created, and it wasn't because of fucking jump scares. And my final issue with the film is that not only do they have a very generic script, but they also take it a step further at actually insulting the audience with making it out that you are all morons and you are all too stupid to put two and two together at multiple points in the film, to where something quite obvious, or even one or two moments that maybe are a little bit more deep cut for those that have more religious knowledge than others, but is still fairly common knowledge. There's something put in front of you that most audience members, the vast majority, should be able to put together pretty quick. And yet, they follow it up with a line of dialogue of a character literally grabbing you by the hand and walking and tiptoeing you through the plot saying, this is what that last line of dialogue meant. You following us now?
Oh, I know where.
Oh, let me lead the way so we don't get lost, huh? Hold hands now.
And if you're enjoying the movie, you might skip over that. It might not be that big of a deal. If you're not enjoying the movie, to me, that was just another insulting detail where it's just like, dude, who the fuck wrote this script and decided that people are too stupid to figure this out? This is not most people's first movie that they've ever seen. We're gonna be fine. We don't need the fucking road signs to get through your basic ass plot. All in all, guys, look, I hate when I have to be this negative on a movie. I genuinely do, even if the movie deserves it, which this one does. I like being able to have a balanced review and tell you what things were done good and where they made mistakes, but nothing infuriates me more than when I experience something and I'm asked to pay for something that just feels like this soulless corporate product rather than a piece of art. This does not feel like a filmmaker and a producer and a writer that are massive fans of The Exorcist got together and wanted to do something to respect the legacy of that original film and carry it into a new generation with some bold new ideas. Not one single frame of this movie feels that way. It feels like a bunch of fucking suits sitting around an oval table with a bunch of clipboards saying, you know, y'all did pretty damn good with that old Michael Voorhees franchise. What the hell can we do to have that same success with Exorcist? Oh, and by the way, we spent $400 million to get the rights, so whatever creative ideas you got, you have to pass that through us, all right? Blumhouse is a production company that sometimes can do some very cool, creative, and fun things, sometimes can do some of the worst films I've seen all year. They do a lot of things in the middle, but this is the first thing that they have done that actually borderline offends me, that it just feels like the most lazy, cynical, bullshit approach to try to squeeze yet another $1 billion or so out of horror fans without putting any effort whatsoever into actually earning that money. And that pisses me off, hence the very frustrated review that you just sat through. And who knows if this movie's gonna be successful? Blumhouse, if they are not a master of anything, they are a master of making a profit. They know how to keep a budget of a film small enough to where no matter what the quality is, no matter what the critic or the audience reception is, they are most likely gonna turn a profit. And I don't know how much money they need to recover that $400 million to gain the rights and the $30 million that it cost to produce this movie and however much they plan to spend on the next two if they go into production. But with the way that I have seen the reception of this film go, they better at least pump the brakes and make sure that that second film is damn good. Because if they thought that the financial and the reception drop-off was bad in the Halloween trilogy, imagine how bad it's going to be when most people, seemingly so far, aren't even on board for the very first film in the trilogy. In conclusion, if you want to see a Blumhouse film this weekend, please check out Totally Killer on Prime Video. It's a significantly better movie than Exorcist Believer. And if you're in the mood for a demonic possession film and you're lucky enough to be in one of the select cities that it's playing in theaters right now, please put your money and your time towards When Evil Lurks, which was my favorite film out of Fantastic Fest and one of the most interesting and unique demonic possession films that I've seen in a long time. Well, that's it for this one, guys. If you enjoyed that, please click over here for all of my 2023 new release reviews. And I'm also going to put my ranking of the Exorcist franchise from a couple of years ago. I will probably definitely be updating that ranking here in about 2 days. So look forward to that. But like, share, and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss that ranking video. And as always, remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean you have to be.